What happens when a species that was supposed to be extinct suddenly appears with technology that shouldn't exist? For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire ruled the galaxy with absolute power. Their massive fleets crushed entire civilizations. Their warriors were unstoppable, and their technology was beyond anything the universe had ever seen. Every species either bowed down or was destroyed. The galaxy knew only one truth: the Zephyrians were invincible. Then came the day when everything changed. It started as a routine patrol near the edge of Zephyrian space. Admiral Vextar commanded the most powerful battle fleet in the Empire, confident that nothing in the galaxy could challenge their might. But when a single unknown warship dropped out of hyperspace, something impossible happened. The ship didn't run. It didn't surrender. It didn't even try to communicate. Instead, it did something that would shake the very foundations of galactic power. It fought back and won. The species piloting that lone warship? Humans, a race the galaxy had forgotten, written off as primitive and weak. But these humans had been hiding, learning, and preparing for this moment. What the Zephyrians didn't know was that they had awakened something far more dangerous than any empire: human ingenuity, determination, and the unbreakable will to never give up. The age of Zephyrian dominance was about to end, and it would happen one battle at a time. This is the story of how the galaxy learned to fear a species it had underestimated. Admiral Vaxstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the endless stars through the massive viewport. His scaled hands rested behind his back, a posture that had become natural after commanding the Zephyrian Empire's most powerful fleet for over 2 decades. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency, his crew monitoring their patrol route through the outer territories of Zephyrian space. The Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia, and Vextar embodied everything that made them the supreme power. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian features were marked by the ritual scars of 1,000 victories. His uniform displayed the golden insignia of an admiral, while his personal collection of trophy weapons from conquered species lined his quarters. Every alien race in the galaxy knew to fear ships bearing the Zephyrian crest. Admiral, his communications officer, called from her station, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency expected of all Zephyrian military personnel. We're receiving the regular reports from patrol sectors 7 through 12. All quiet on the frontier. Vextar nodded without turning from the viewport. These routine patrols had become almost boring. It had been over 50 years since any species had dared to challenge Zephyrian authority directly. The last major rebellion had been crushed so thoroughly that entire star systems still bore the scars of Zephyrian retribution. Fear was an effective teacher, and the galaxy had learned its lessons well. His tactical officer, a younger Zephyrian named Kex Lin, approached with the day's intelligence summary. "Sir, our long-range sensors continue to detect no significant military buildup in any of the outer systems. The tributary species are maintaining their required resource quotas, and there are no signs of organized resistance anywhere in our territory." As expected, Vextar replied, finally turning from the stars. "When you control over 60% of known space and possess the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, rebellion becomes an exercise in futility. The other species have learned this truth." The bridge crew continued their work with mechanical precision. The Eternal Conquest was one of 12 massive dreadnoughts in Vextar's fleet, each ship capable of reducing a planet to ash within hours. The fleet's combined firepower could eliminate entire star systems, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. This knowledge had brought 3,000 years of relative peace, though it was the peace of absolute submission. Vextar moved to his command chair, reviewing tactical displays that showed the positions of his fleet. Each ship was a masterwork of Zephyrian engineering, bristling with weapons that could tear through any known defensive system. Their shields could withstand direct hits from planetary defense cannons, and their engines allowed them to cross vast distances faster than any other species could manage. "Admiral," the sensor technician announced, her voice carrying a note of confusion that immediately caught Vextar's attention. "I'm detecting an anomaly in Sector 9. Long-range sensors are picking up what appears to be a hyperspace exit signature." Vextar leaned forward. Unscheduled hyperspace travel in this sector was highly unusual. All legitimate traffic was required to file flight plans with Zephyrian authorities, and military vessels operated on predetermined schedules. "Can you identify the vessel?" The sensor technician worked frantically at her console, her scaled fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Sir, the signature doesn't match any known ship type in our database. The energy pattern is unusual. I've never seen readings like this." Kexlan joined the sensor technician at her station, his own expertise adding to the analysis. Admiral, this is definitely not a Zephyrian vessel. The hyperspace exit signature suggests advanced technology, but the configuration doesn't match any of the major spacefaring species we know. A slight frown crossed Vextar's features. While the Zephyrians ruled most of the galaxy, there were still a few independent species maintaining their own territories through careful diplomacy and strategic isolation. Perhaps one of them had developed new technology. It wouldn't be the first time a minor species had achieved some small technological advancement, though none had ever posed a real threat to Zephyrian supremacy.
Distance and bearing?
Vextar asked. Approximately 4 light hours away, bearing 27 Mark IV, the sensor technician reported. The vessel appears to be holding position after hyperspace exit. No immediate course change detected. Vextar considered the situation. Protocol demanded that any unidentified vessel in Zephyrian space be intercepted and investigated. Pirates occasionally used stolen technology to raid merchant vessels, and while they posed no threat to military ships, they could disrupt trade routes if left unchecked. Helm, set intercept course. Maximum sublight speed, he ordered. Communications, transmit standard identification protocols. Inform the unknown vessel that they have entered Zephyrian space without authorization and must comply with boarding procedures. The Eternal Conquest and its escort vessels changed course smoothly, their massive engines propelling the fleet toward the unknown contact. Vextar felt a familiar sense of satisfaction as his ships moved into action. Even routine encounters like this reinforced Zephyrian authority and reminded the galaxy who maintained order among the stars. As they approached, the sensor readings became more detailed and increasingly puzzling. The unknown vessel appeared to be roughly the size of a Zephyrian heavy cruiser, but its energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases. The ship's hull seemed to absorb sensor beams in ways that defied conventional understanding of starship construction. Admiral, Kexlan reported, studying the tactical displays with growing concern. I'm getting very unusual readings from this vessel. Its power output suggests extremely advanced reactor technology, possibly more efficient than our own systems. Vextar raised an eyebrow. While individual species occasionally developed innovations in specific areas, none had ever approached overall Zephyrian technological superiority. Elaborate, the energy distribution patterns suggest weapons and defensive systems that don't match any known configurations. Also, the ship appears to be constructed from materials that are partially deflecting our active scans. We're not getting complete structural readings. The communications officer looked up from her station with frustration evident in her voice. Sir, the unknown vessel is not responding to our identification requests. We've transmitted on all standard frequencies using every major galactic language protocol. Vextar stood from his command chair. Non-compliance with Zephyrian authority was rare, and when it occurred, it usually indicated either technical problems or deliberate hostility. Either way, the situation required direct action. Bring us to within weapons range, he commanded. Charge primary batteries to 50%. If they won't respond to communication, perhaps they'll respond to a demonstration of superior firepower. The fleet moved closer to the unknown vessel, their weapon systems powering up with the distinctive whine of charging energy cannons. Vextar had used this tactic countless times over his career. Few species were foolish enough to resist when faced with the obvious superiority of Zephyrian military might. As they closed to within effective weapons range, the mysterious ship finally responded, but not in any way Vextar had expected. Instead of surrendering or attempting to flee, the vessel turned to face the approaching Zephyrian fleet directly. Sir, the tactical officer announced with disbelief, the unknown vessel is powering up what appear to be weapons systems. Energy readings are significant. Vextar felt a moment of surprise, followed immediately by cold anger. Direct defiance of Zephyrian authority was not just foolish, it was suicidal. Whatever species was operating this vessel would learn the same lesson that had been taught to countless others throughout galactic history. All ships, battle formation, he ordered sharply. Charge all weapons to full power, shields to maximum. Prepare to demonstrate why challenging the Zephyrian Empire is a fatal mistake. The 12 ships of his fleet arranged themselves in a standard attack formation, their combined firepower capable of overwhelming virtually any target. Vextar had destroyed entire planetary defense fleets with less force than he now brought to bear against a single unknown vessel. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown ship. Audio only, in what appears to be basic galactic standard. Put it through. Vextar commanded, expecting either a surrender or final defiant words from whoever was about to be destroyed. The voice that emerged from the bridge speakers was unlike any Vextar had heard before. It carried an accent he couldn't identify, speaking with a calm confidence that seemed completely inappropriate given the overwhelming military force arrayed against the single vessel. Zephyrian Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or we will consider your continued presence an act of aggression. Stunned silence filled the bridge. Vextar stared at the communications console as if it had malfunctioned. Earth? The name meant nothing to him, and the idea that a single ship would threaten an entire Zephyrian fleet was so absurd it bordered on insanity. Kexlin broke the silence first. Admiral, should I inform them that they are outnumbered 12-1 and outgunned by approximately 50-1? Vextar found his voice, though he could hardly believe the situation was real. Open a channel. This is Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. Identify your species and explain your presence in Zephyrian space immediately, or you will be destroyed. The response came without hesitation, the same calm voice maintaining its inexplicable confidence. Admiral, my species is human, and we're here because it's time for your empire to learn that the galaxy doesn't belong to you anymore. You have 15 seconds to withdraw. Human. Vextar searched his memory for any reference to such a species and found nothing. No major galactic power used that designation, and certainly no minor species would dare make such statements to a Zephyrian fleet. Sir, the sensor technician called urgently. The unknown vessel's weapon systems are now showing full power. Energy readings are... Admiral, I think we may have underestimated their capabilities. Vextar looked at the tactical display, seeing the energy patterns emanating from the mysterious ship. For the first time in his long career, he felt a whisper of uncertainty. The readings suggested weapon systems that rivaled or possibly exceeded Zephyrian technology, but that was impossible. The Zephyrians had maintained technological superiority for thousands of years. No species in the galaxy possessed weapons that could threaten a Zephyrian dreadnought, let alone an entire fleet. Time's up, Admiral, the human captain's voice announced calmly. We warned you. What happened next changed everything Vextar thought he knew about power in the galaxy. The human vessel opened fire, but not with the relatively primitive energy weapons he had expected from an unknown species. Instead, brilliant beams of coherent energy lanced out from the Defiance with precision and power that made Vextar's blood run cold. The first salvo struck his escort cruiser Victory's Edge, and instead of the minor damage he expected, the ship's shields collapsed entirely under the assault. Impossible, Kexlin whispered, staring at his tactical displays in disbelief. No single ship has enough firepower to overwhelm a Zephyrian cruiser's shields that quickly. The human vessel continued its attack, moving with agility that seemed to defy physics. Its weapons found weak points in Zephyrian defenses with surgical precision, while its own shields absorbed return fire from multiple ships without apparent strain. All ships, concentrate fire on the unknown vessel, Vextar commanded, his voice tight with growing alarm. Maximum firepower, all weapons. The combined might of 11 Zephyrian warships unleashed a barrage that should have vaporized any known vessel. Energy cannons, plasma torpedoes, and particle beams converged on the human ship in a display of destructive power that could level cities. The Defiance disappeared momentarily in the brilliant explosion of intercepted energy weapons, and for a moment Vextar allowed himself to believe the threat had been neutralized. No ship could survive that level of concentrated firepower. Then the energy dissipated, and the human vessel emerged completely unharmed. Shields holding at 97%, came Captain Chen's voice over the open channel, now carrying a hint of amusement. Is that really the best the mighty Zephyrian Empire can do? Vextar stared at his tactical displays in complete shock. Not only had the human ship survived the combined firepower of his fleet, it had barely been affected. The shield technology required for such defense was beyond anything the Zephyrians possessed. The Defiance resumed its attack, and this time its weapons seemed even more devastating. Another escort cruiser lost shields and began taking hull damage, its armor proving no more effective than its defensive screens. Admiral, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, we're losing this engagement. Our weapons are having minimal effect, while theirs are systematically destroying our ships. Recommend immediate withdrawal. For the first time in 3,000 years of Zephyrian history, one of their fleets was being defeated by a single enemy vessel. Vextar felt his entire understanding of galactic power crumbling around him. Sir, the communications officer announced, Captain Chen is transmitting again. Admiral, the human captain's voice filled the bridge, no longer calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. Withdraw now, or I'll demonstrate just how outmatched you really are. Vextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, seeing his own shock and disbelief reflected in their expressions. Everything they had believed about Zephyrian supremacy was being shattered by a single ship from a species they had never heard of. As another of his cruisers began breaking apart under the relentless assault of human weapons, Vextar realized he was witnessing the end of an era. The age of unquestioned Zephyrian dominance was over, and it had entered the moment a human warship appeared. The galaxy would never be the same. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Zephyrian fleet retreat to the tactical hologram floating before her. The massive alien warships were moving away at maximum speed, their energy signatures fading as they fled the battle they couldn't win. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring the withdrawal and ensuring no Zephyrian vessels attempted a surprise attack. Chen was a compact woman in her 40s, her black hair tied back in a practical military style. Her uniform bore no elaborate decorations like those favored by many alien species, just simple rank insignia and the patch of the Terran Defense Force. But her eyes held a depth that spoke of experiences beyond anything the Zephyrians could imagine. "The status report," she requested, moving to stand behind her tactical officer's station. Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez looked up from his displays, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "All systems operating at optimal efficiency, Captain. Shields held at 97% throughout the engagement. The Zephyrian weapons barely registered on our defensive grid." Chen nodded, though she felt no satisfaction in the easy victory. This had been necessary, but she took no pleasure in demonstrating humanity's capabilities through violence. The bridge crew understood this, maintaining their professional focus despite having just accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. "Communications? Any further transmissions from the retreating fleet?" she asked. Ensign Lisa Park checked her instruments. "Negative, Captain. They're maintaining radio silence. Long-range sensors show they're heading directly back toward the center of Zephyrian space at maximum speed."
"Good," Chen replied.
"Let them carry the message back to their empire. Sometimes the most effective communication happens when you don't say anything at all." The Defiance was unlike any warship that had ever operated in this galaxy. Where Zephyrian vessels emphasized size and overwhelming firepower, the human ship embodied elegance and efficiency. Every system had been designed not just for maximum effectiveness, but for reliability under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Chen moved to her command chair, considering the implications of what had just occurred. For over a century, humanity had remained hidden in the outer rim of the galaxy, observing the various alien civilizations while developing technology that far exceeded anything else in known space. They had watched the Zephyrian Empire expand, had seen countless species either subjugated or destroyed, and had carefully prepared for the day when they would finally reveal themselves. "Captain," Rodriguez said, reviewing the tactical recordings from the engagement, "the Zephyrian weapons showed exactly the energy patterns we expected from our intelligence reports. Their technology appears to have stagnated over the past several centuries." Chen understood the significance of this observation. When a civilization became accustomed to absolute dominance, innovation often suffered. The Zephyrians had been so successful for so long that they had stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Meanwhile, humanity had been driven by necessity to achieve breakthroughs that seemed impossible. The bridge crew represented the best of human military training and scientific achievement. Each officer had undergone years of specialized education, not just in their technical fields, but in understanding the psychology and capabilities of the various alien species they might encounter. They knew more about Zephyrian military doctrine than most Zephyrian officers did. "Helm, set course for the Kepler station," Chen ordered. "We need to report back to command and prepare for the next phase of operations." The Defiance turned smoothly and accelerated toward hyperspace transition point. Its engines were based on principles that no other species in the galaxy had discovered, allowing for both incredible speed and complete stealth when necessary. The ship could have approached the Zephyrian fleet undetected if Chen had chosen, but the point of today's encounter had been to announce humanity's presence in terms that couldn't be misunderstood. As they entered hyperspace, Chen reflected on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. Earth had been discovered by Zephyrian scouts nearly 200 years ago, but the initial assessment had classified humans as a primitive species with no space travel capability. The scouts had reported back that Earth posed no threat and offered little value for conquest, recommending that the planet be left alone until humans developed sufficiently to be worth incorporating into the Empire. That assessment had been both accurate and completely wrong. Humans were indeed primitive by Zephyrian standards at the time, but they possessed something that the Zephyrians had never encountered: an absolutely relentless drive to improve and adapt. Instead of following the typical pattern of gradual technological advancement, humanity had experienced an explosion of scientific achievement that compressed centuries of normal development into mere decades. The key had been learning from the Zephyrians themselves. Human intelligence services had managed to acquire examples of Zephyrian technology through carefully planned operations that appeared to be random equipment losses or accidents. Each piece of alien technology had been studied, reverse-engineered, and then improved upon. But humans didn't just copy what they found. They approached each system from first principles and often discovered better ways to achieve the same results. "Captain," Ensign Park announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Kepler Station. Admiral Harrison requests immediate conference upon our arrival." Chen nodded. Admiral Harrison would want a complete report on the first official contact between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. The engagement had been a test, both of human military capabilities and Zephyrian response patterns. The data collected would inform every subsequent operation in their campaign to end Zephyrian dominance. The hyperspace journey to Kepler Station took 6 hours, during which Chen reviewed intelligence reports on Zephyrian military structure and political organization. The Empire ruled through fear and overwhelming force. But, like all tyrannies, it had inherent weaknesses that could be exploited by a sufficiently capable adversary. Kepler Station was humanity's primary military facility in this region of space, though its existence was unknown to any alien civilization. Built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, the station housed advanced manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and command centers for coordinating human military operations. More importantly, it served as home base for the small but incredibly advanced fleet of warships that humanity had constructed for this campaign. The Defiance emerged from hyperspace near the station's concealed entrance, its identity confirmed by quantum encryption protocols that no other species could break. As they approached the docking bay, Chen could see other human vessels being serviced and prepared for their own missions. Admiral Catherine Harrison was waiting in the briefing room when Chen arrived. Harrison was a tall woman with silver hair and keen intelligence that had guided human military planning for over 2 decades. She had been instrumental in developing the strategy that would allow humanity to challenge the Zephyrian Empire, despite being vastly outnumbered. "Captain Chen," Harrison said as she entered, "I trust your demonstration was effective?" Chen took her seat at the conference table, where holographic displays showed the tactical recording of the engagement. "The Zephyrians performed exactly as our intelligence predicted, Admiral. Their weapons and defense systems showed no improvements over the specifications in our files. More importantly, they showed no ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances." Harrison studied the tactical displays, paying particular attention to the Zephyrian fleet's response patterns. "And their commander, Admiral Vextar, appeared competent within the constraints of conventional Zephyrian doctrine," Chen replied. "He followed standard procedures and made tactically sound decisions based on his understanding of galactic military capabilities. Unfortunately for him, that understanding is about to become obsolete." The recording showed the moment when the Zephyrian weapons had struck the Defiance's shields without effect. Harrison paused the display at that point, examining the energy readings. "The look of complete shock on their faces when our shields held," she mused. "They've become so accustomed to technological superiority that they can't process the concept of meeting something more advanced than themselves." Chen nodded. "Admiral Vextar ordered a full withdrawal when it became clear his weapons couldn't penetrate our defenses. He made the rational choice, but he also ensured that word of this engagement will spread throughout the Zephyrian command structure. This had been part of the plan. Humanity could have remained hidden indefinitely, but that would have allowed the Zephyrian Empire to continue oppressing countless species throughout the galaxy. The decision to reveal themselves had been made carefully, with full understanding of the consequences." "What's our next step?" Chen asked. Harrison activated a larger tactical display showing the entire Zephyrian Empire. Thousands of star systems were highlighted in red, representing worlds under Zephyrian control, but scattered throughout the Empire were smaller clusters of systems, marked in blue. "Intelligence reports indicate that your demonstration has already had effects beyond what we anticipated," Harrison said. "Several tributary species have begun questioning Zephyrian authority. There are reports of minor rebellions starting in at least 6 different sectors." Chen studied the display with interest. Rebellions against Zephyrian rule weren't unusual, but they typically lasted only a few days before being crushed by overwhelming military force. The fact that multiple uprisings were occurring simultaneously suggested that news of the human victory was spreading faster than expected. The Zephyrians built their empire on the foundation of fear, Harrison continued. Once that fear begins to crack, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. Your engagement didn't just defeat a single fleet. It demonstrated that the Zephyrians aren't invincible. Chen understood the implications. Throughout galactic history, no species had ever successfully resisted Zephyrian expansion. Many had tried, but all had eventually been conquered or destroyed. The knowledge that resistance was possible would inspire hope among the oppressed species. But it would also force the Zephyrians to respond aggressively. They'll escalate, Chen predicted. Admiral Vextar will report that he encountered a previously unknown species with superior technology. The Zephyrian High Command will want to neutralize this threat before it can inspire widespread rebellion. Harrison nodded approvingly. Which brings us to Phase 2 of our operation. The Zephyrians will send a much larger force to locate and destroy what they perceive as a single dangerous ship. When they do, they're going to discover just how badly they've underestimated humanity. The next phase would involve revealing more of humanity's capabilities while simultaneously supporting the rebellions that were beginning to emerge throughout Zephyrian space. It would be a complex operation requiring precise timing and coordination, but the foundation had been laid with the first demonstration of human military superiority. Captain Harrison said, "You and the Defiance will be operating independently for the next several weeks. Your mission is to locate Zephyrian military assets in the outer territories and eliminate them as opportunities arise. Don't engage their main battle fleets yet. We want them to think you're still just a single rogue vessel." Chen accepted the mission parameters, understanding that she would be operating with minimal support in hostile territory. But the Defiance and its crew were prepared for exactly this type of operation. They had trained for years to operate behind enemy lines, striking at targets of opportunity while avoiding decisive battles that might reveal the true scope of human capabilities. As she prepared to return to her ship, Chen reflected on the historical significance of what they were attempting. Humanity was taking on an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia, challenging a military force that controlled thousands of star systems with a fleet that numbered fewer than 50 ships. But those ships represented the culmination of human ingenuity, determination, and refusal to accept defeat. Each vessel was more advanced than anything else in the galaxy, crewed by individuals who understood that they were fighting not just for humanity's freedom, but for the liberation of countless oppressed species throughout known space. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on the assumption that no species could match their technological and military capabilities. That assumption was about to be tested by a species they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. As the Defiance departed Kepler Station for its next mission, Chen knew that the galaxy was entering a new era. The age of Zephyrian dominance was ending, and it would be replaced by something unprecedented, a coalition of free species working together as equals. But first, the Empire would have to fall, one battle at a time. Supreme Commander Zekmoth stood before the massive holographic display in the Zephyrian High Command Center, his forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the tactical reports flooding in from across the Empire. The Central Command facility was located deep within the capital world of Zephyria Prime, protected by layers of planetary shields and orbital defense platforms that had never been tested in actual combat. At 12 feet tall, Zekmoth was imposing even by Zephyrian standards. His exoskeleton bore the distinctive markings of the highest military caste, while his ceremonial armor displayed the symbols of every major campaign he had led during his 2-century career. No living being in the galaxy had commanded more successful military operations, and his strategic genius had been responsible for expanding Zephyrian territory by over 15% during his tenure. But today, for the first time in his long career, Zekmoth was looking at reports of Zephyrian defeats. "Summarize the situation," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had intimidated countless enemy commanders throughout the galaxy. General Kokstar, his primary intelligence officer, activated a series of tactical displays showing various sectors of the Empire. "Sir, in the past 2 weeks since Admiral Vextar's encounter with the unknown human vessel, we have recorded 17 separate engagements between our forces and what appear to be ships of the same design and capability." Zekmoth studied the distribution of reported contacts. They were scattered across a vast area of space, suggesting either a much larger human fleet than initially suspected, or vessels with extraordinary mobility capabilities. "Casualties?" he asked tersely. 37 ships lost, ranging from patrol corvettes to heavy cruisers. Kekstar replied, his voice carefully controlled. "In every engagement, our forces were either destroyed or forced to retreat. We have yet to record a single confirmed hit on any human vessel." The silence in the command center was absolute. For 3,000 years, Zephyrian military reports had consisted of victories, conquests, and the occasional mention of minor equipment losses during routine operations. The concept of sustained defeats was alien to everyone present. Zekmoth moved to a detailed tactical display showing the most recent engagement. Show me the recordings from the Kethvar incident. The hologram shifted to show the battlecruiser Devastator engaging a single human vessel near the Kethvar system. Zekmoth watched as the human ship designated only as Earth Vessel Guardian systematically destroyed the Zephyrian cruiser's escort fighters before crippling the main vessel itself. The human ship's weapons penetrated our shields as if they didn't exist, Kekstar explained. Energy output analysis suggests technology at least 2 generations ahead of our current systems. More concerning, their defensive capabilities appear even more advanced than their weapons. Zekmoth replayed the section where the Devastator had achieved what should have been a direct hit on the human vessel. The energy discharge was clearly visible, but the human ship continued operating without any apparent damage. Have we identified the source of their technological advantage, he asked. General Rexcon, the Empire's chief technology officer, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Sir, our analysis teams have been working continuously to understand human capabilities. The energy signatures we're detecting suggest fundamental advances in multiple areas of physics that we haven't even begun to explore. This was troubling news. The Zephyrian Empire's technological superiority had been built on systematic conquest and absorption of other species' knowledge. Over 3 millennia, they had encountered and incorporated the best innovations from hundreds of different civilizations. The idea that a single species could achieve advances beyond Zephyrian understanding was almost incomprehensible. What do we know about their origin? Zekmoth demanded. Kekstar activated historical records. The species designation human appears in our exploration archives from approximately 200 years ago. Initial surveys classified their homeworld, Earth, as inhabited by a primitive species with no space travel capability. The assessment recommended ignoring them until they developed sufficiently to warrant conquest. Zekmoth stared at the ancient report, reading the dismissive evaluation of human civilization. The survey team had noted humans' tendency toward internal conflict and their relatively short lifespans compared to most galactic species, concluding that they posed no potential threat to Zephyrian interests. Clearly, that assessment was incomplete, he said dryly. What changed? Rex's Khan consulted his technical analysis. Sir, based on the capabilities we're observing, human technology has advanced at a rate that should be physically impossible. To achieve their current level from the baseline described in our historical records would require scientific breakthroughs occurring at nearly 100 times the normal rate of technological progress. The implications were staggering. Most species took thousands of years to advance, from primitive planetary civilizations to spacefaring powers capable of challenging established galactic nations. The humans appear to have compressed that entire development cycle into a fraction of the expected time frame. Sir, Kekstar continued, there's another factor we need to consider. Intelligence reports from our tributary species indicate that human vessels have been observed providing direct assistance to rebellion movements in at least 12 different sectors. Zekmoth felt a cold chill run through his exoskeleton. Individual defeats could be managed and overcome, but if the humans were actively encouraging resistance throughout the Empire, the situation was far more serious than a mere territorial dispute. Show me these reports, he ordered. The tactical display shifted to show the Altarian system, where a human warship had appeared during a Zephyrian punitive expedition against a rebellious colony world. The recording showed the human vessel Liberator intercepting a Zephyrian bombardment fleet and systematically destroying every ship that refused to withdraw. The Altarian rebels had been fighting a hopeless resistance for over 6 months, Kekstar explained. Our forces were prepared to implement standard pacification protocols. The human intervention not only saved the rebel colony, but provided them with advanced defensive systems that will make future suppression extremely difficult. Zekmoth studied similar reports from other systems. The pattern was unmistakable. Human ships were appearing wherever Zephyrian authority was being challenged, providing both direct military assistance and advanced technology to rebel forces. They're not random pirates or explorers, he realized aloud. This is a coordinated campaign designed to destabilize our empire. Rex's Khan nodded grimly. Sir, our analysis suggests the humans have been observing our operations for a considerable period. Their targeting is too precise, their timing too perfect. They know our military doctrine better than most of our own officers. The strategic implications were becoming clear. The humans weren't just technologically advanced. They had studied Zephyrian society and military organization extensively. They understood exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage to Imperial authority. What are our options? Zekmoth asked. General Vexel, the Empire's master strategist, stepped forward. Sir, we have three potential courses of action. First, we could attempt to locate and destroy the human homeworld before they can expand their fleet. Second, we can negotiate some form of coexistence agreement. Third, we could adapt our own military capabilities to counter their technological advantages.
Zekmoth considered each option carefully.
Locating Earth would be difficult without better intelligence on human operations. And if their military capabilities were as advanced as reported, a direct assault might prove catastrophic. Negotiation was almost unthinkable. The Zephyrian Empire had never accepted equals, only vassals and enemies. What about the third option, he asked. Rex's Khan looked uncomfortable. Sir, adapting our technology to match human capabilities would require fundamental research into areas of physics we don't currently understand. Even with unlimited resources, such a program would take decades to produce results. The command center fell silent as the full scope of the crisis became apparent. The Zephyrian Empire was facing an enemy that was not only technologically superior, but strategically sophisticated and apparently committed to systematic destruction of Imperial authority throughout the galaxy. Sir, Star said quietly, there's one more factor we need to discuss. Our tributary species are beginning to believe that Zephyrian rule isn't inevitable. Some are openly discussing the possibility of independence. This was the development Zekmoth had most feared. The Zephyrian Empire controlled thousands of star systems, not through direct occupation, but through the absolute certainty that resistance was futile. If that certainty crumbled, the administrative burden of controlling such a vast territory through force alone would be impossible. Recommendations? He asked. Vexel activated a strategic overview of the Empire. Sir, I believe we need to demonstrate that the human victories are anomalous events, not representative of any fundamental change in galactic power structure. I recommend assembling our largest battle fleet and conducting a decisive engagement that will eliminate the human threat. Zekmoth studied the proposal. A massive show of force might indeed reassure tributary species and discourage further rebellions, but it would also represent an enormous commitment of resources against an enemy whose full capabilities remained unknown. How large a fleet would you recommend? He asked. Sir, I propose Task Force Annihilation, 50 dreadnoughts, 200 heavy cruisers, and supporting vessels. Total complement of over 400 ships carrying enough firepower to sterilize multiple star systems. The proposal was staggering in scope. Task Force Annihilation would represent nearly 20% of the Empire's total military strength, concentrated in a single operational unit. No force of that size had been assembled since the Great Conquest campaigns over a millennium ago. The risks, Zekmoth asked. Substantial, Vexel admitted. If the humans prove capable of defeating or significantly damaging such a force, the psychological impact throughout the Empire would be severe. However, if we achieve decisive victory, it will demonstrate that human technology, however advanced, cannot overcome superior numbers and coordination.
Rexcon raised a technical concern.
Sir, we should also consider that the humans may have additional capabilities they haven't yet revealed. Every engagement so far has involved only single human vessels. We have no data on their fleet tactics or larger ship configurations. Zekmoth pondered this warning. Military wisdom suggested never committing to a major engagement without complete intelligence on enemy capabilities, but the alternative was allowing human interference to continue undermining Imperial authority throughout the galaxy. Prepare Task Force Annihilation, he decided, but I want comprehensive intelligence gathering conducted simultaneously. Use every resource we have to locate the human base of operations. If we're going to fight them, we need to understand exactly what we're fighting. As his subordinates began implementing the orders, Zekmoth remained before the tactical displays, contemplating the unprecedented situation facing his empire. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrians had been the undisputed masters of known space. Their technology had been superior, their military doctrine had been proven, and their will to dominate had been absolute. But now they faced an enemy that challenged every assumption upon which their empire was built. The humans possessed better technology, superior intelligence, and apparently unlimited determination to resist Zephyrian authority. More troubling, they seemed to understand that the key to defeating the Empire wasn't just winning battles, but inspiring others to believe that victory was possible. Zekmoth had commanded victorious campaigns against dozens of species throughout his career. He had seen proud civilizations reduced to tribute-paying vassals, and had overseen the complete extinction of those foolish enough to continue resisting after defeat was inevitable. But as he studied the reports of human capabilities and growing rebellion throughout his empire, he began to suspect that this campaign would be unlike any he had fought before. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They represented a fundamental challenge to the order that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The age of Zephyrian dominance was being questioned for the first time in recorded history, and the outcome of that challenge would determine the future of every species in known space. Admiral Catherine Harrison stood on the observation deck of the human battleship Indomitable, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled before her. Through the reinforced viewing ports, she could see the distinctive outlines of 437 Zephyrian warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of distant stars. Task Force Annihilation represented the most powerful military force ever assembled by any species in recorded galactic history. The 50 dreadnoughts alone carried enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic debris, while the supporting vessels provided defensive screens and tactical flexibility that should have made the formation virtually invincible. Harrison had been expecting this response. Intelligence reports had indicated that the Zephyrians would eventually commit significant resources to eliminating what they perceived as the human threat. What she hadn't anticipated was the sheer scale of their reaction. The formation approaching her position was larger than many species' entire space forces. Admiral Commander Rodriguez reported from his station. Long-range sensors confirmed 437 Zephyrian vessels. Energy signatures match projected fleet composition from intelligence estimates. Estimated time to weapons range, 43 minutes. Harrison nodded, moving to the tactical display that showed the approaching enemy fleet alongside the human formation. The contrast was striking. Where the Zephyrians had assembled hundreds of massive warships, the human fleet consisted of just 12 vessels. To any outside observer, the outcome of the engagement should have been obvious, but appearances could be deceiving, especially when one side possessed technology that the other couldn't comprehend. Status of our fleet? Harrison asked. All ships reporting ready for combat operations, Rodriguez replied. Weapon systems charged, shields at maximum power, and hyperspace drives standing by for tactical jump capabilities. The 12 ships of the human fleet represented the culmination of over a century of focused technological development. Each vessel incorporated advances that no other species in the galaxy had achieved, from quantum coherent energy shields to weapon systems that operated on principles of physics that most civilizations hadn't even discovered. More importantly, each ship was crewed by individuals who understood exactly what they were fighting for. Unlike the Zephyrians, who fought to maintain dominance, the humans were fighting for the liberation of every oppressed species in the galaxy. Harrison activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. Today we face the largest military force in galactic history. The Zephyrians believe that superior numbers can overcome superior technology and determination. We're about to prove them wrong. On her tactical display, she could see the positions of all 12 human vessels. The battleships Indomitable, Relentless, and Unyielding. The heavy cruisers Defiance, Guardian, Liberator, and Vengeance, and the specialized warfare ships Phantom, Wraith, Spectre, Eclipse, and Shadow. Each ship had been designed for specific tactical roles, but all shared the revolutionary technology that made them individually superior to anything the Zephyrians possessed.
Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship.
Audio and visual. Put it through, Harrison ordered. The main display shifted to show the bridge of a massive Zephyrian dreadnought. At the center stood a figure that Harrison recognized from intelligence files. Fleet Admiral Kextol, one of the most experienced military commanders in the Zephyrian Empire. His scarred exoskeleton and elaborate uniform marked him as a veteran of dozens of successful campaigns. Human Admiral, Kextol's translated voice filled the bridge. I am Fleet Admiral Kextol of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You command 12 vessels against over 400 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Surrender now, and your species will be granted the opportunity to serve the Empire as a tributary race. Harrison studied the Zephyrian commander, noting the confidence in his posture and voice. Kextol genuinely believed that he was offering generous terms to a hopelessly outmatched enemy. He had no concept of what human technology could achieve. Fleet Admiral Kextol, Harrison replied calmly. I am Admiral Catherine Harrison of the Terran Defense Force. Your empire has oppressed countless species for 3,000 years. Today, that oppression ends. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces and avoid unnecessary casualties. The Zephyrian Admiral's expression shifted to what Harrison recognized as amusement among his species. Admiral Harrison, my fleet carries enough firepower to destroy your entire formation in minutes. Your offer of terms is either courageous or delusional. You're about to find out which, Harrison replied, cutting the transmission. She turned to her tactical officer. All ships, execute Formation Omega. Begin the engagement on my command. The 12 human vessels spread out in a complex three-dimensional pattern that had been practiced countless times in simulation. Unlike traditional fleet formations that focused on concentrated firepower or mutual defense, Formation Omega was designed to maximize the unique capabilities of human technology. The Zephyrian fleet responded predictably, arranging itself in their standard battle formation with dreadnoughts at the center and smaller vessels providing screening and support. It was a formation that had proven successful in hundreds of previous engagements against conventional opponents. But the humans weren't conventional opponents. Admiral Rodriguez reported, Zephyrian fleet is entering weapons range. They're charging primary batteries across the formation. Harrison watched the energy readings spike across the Zephyrian fleet as hundreds of weapons systems prepared to fire. The sheer amount of destructive power being brought to bear was staggering, enough to overwhelm any known defensive system through pure volume of fire. All ships commence attack, Harrison ordered. What happened next would be studied by military historians throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet didn't engage in the traditional exchange of massed firepower that characterized most space battles. Instead, they demonstrated capabilities that the Zephyrians hadn't known existed. The specialized warfare ships Phantom, Wraith, Spectre, Eclipse, and Shadow seemed to vanish from Zephyrian sensors entirely, their advanced stealth systems rendering them effectively invisible. The Zephyrian fleet found itself trying to target enemies that appeared to have simply disappeared. Meanwhile, the human battleships and cruisers opened fire with weapons that operated on completely different principles than anything the Zephyrians had encountered. Instead of traditional energy beams or projectile weapons, the human ships employed coherent quantum disruptors that could penetrate shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The first salvo from the Indomitable struck the Zephyrian dreadnought Eternal Victory, and instead of the expected explosion of intercepted energy, the massive alien warship simply began to come apart. Its shields offered no protection against weapons that operated on subatomic principles, and its heavy armor proved no more effective than tissue paper. Impossible, Kextel's voice echoed across the communication channels as he watched his flagship's escort vessels being systematically destroyed by enemies that seemed immune to return fire. The Zephyrian fleet responded with concentrated barrages that should have obliterated any target in known space. Hundreds of energy cannons, plasma torpedoes, and particle beams converged on the human vessels in displays of firepower that could be seen from neighboring star systems. But the human ships continued operating without apparent damage. Their quantum-coherent shields didn't just absorb or deflect incoming energy, they converted it into additional power for their own weapon systems. The more the Zephyrians attacked, the stronger the human ships became. Harrison watched the tactical display as the engagement unfolded exactly as simulated. The Zephyrians were fighting according to 3,000 years of military doctrine, but that doctrine was based on assumptions that no longer applied when facing human technology. Admiral Rodriguez reported with barely controlled excitement, enemy casualties are mounting rapidly. We've destroyed over 50 vessels without taking any damage ourselves. The stealth ships had reappeared in the midst of the Zephyrian formation, their weapons targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Command ships lost communication arrays, weapons platforms lost targeting systems, and engines failed throughout the enemy fleet as human technology proved its superiority. Fleet Admiral Kextel found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding a force that was being systematically destroyed while inflicting no damage in return. His tactical displays showed impossible readings. Human ships operating at full capability despite being hit by weapons that should have vaporized them, while Zephyrian vessels fell to attacks that their sensors could barely detect. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship, he ordered desperately. Maximum firepower, continuous barrage. The remaining Zephyrian vessels focused their attacks on the Indomitable, creating a storm of energy that would have been visible from several light years away. Harrison felt the ship shudder slightly as its shields absorbed and converted the incoming energy, but her vessel continued operating without any system failures.
Return fire, she ordered calmly.
The Indomitable's quantum disruptors lanced out toward the Zephyrian flagship, their coherent energy beams passing through shields and armor as if they were empty space. The massive alien dreadnought began losing structural integrity, its hull failing at the molecular level as human weapons disrupted the fundamental forces holding it together. Kextel's last transmission was a warning to his empire. All Zephyrian forces, break off engagement immediately. Human technology is beyond our understanding. Repeat, break off engagement and withdraw. But by then, it was too late for most of his fleet. The human vessels had positioned themselves to prevent escape, and their superior speed and maneuverability allowed them to pursue any ships that attempted to flee. Within 3 hours of the engagement's beginning, Task Force Annihilation had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. Harrison stood quietly on her bridge as the battle concluded, feeling no satisfaction in the destruction of so many vessels. The Zephyrian crews had been following orders from leaders who couldn't comprehend what they were facing, but their defeat had been necessary to demonstrate that the age of Zephyrian dominance was definitively over.
Casualties?
She asked. 0 human losses, Rodriguez reported. Minor shield drain on the Relentless and Guardian, but all systems operating at full capacity. The implications would ripple throughout the galaxy within hours. The largest military force in galactic history had been defeated by 12 ships from a species that most civilizations had never heard of. The psychological impact would be immense, especially among the tributary species that had lived under Zephyrian oppression for generations. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources throughout the galaxy. News of the engagement is spreading rapidly. Harrison nodded. This had been the decisive moment in humanity's campaign to liberate the galaxy. The Zephyrians had committed their ultimate reserve, their most powerful military formation, and had seen it destroyed without inflicting a single casualty in return. Send a message to all human vessels operating in the field, she ordered. Phase 3 is now authorized. It's time to help our new allies reclaim their freedom. Throughout the galaxy, species that had served the Zephyrian Empire for centuries began declaring independence. Human ships appeared in system after system, providing advanced technology and military support to beings who had never imagined that resistance was possible. The age of Zephyrian dominance hadn't just ended. It had been obliterated in a single afternoon by a species that refused to accept that might made right. The galaxy would never be the same, and for billions of oppressed beings throughout known space, that was exactly what they had been hoping for. 1 year after the Battle of Task Force Annihilation, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation lounge of the orbital station New Horizons, watching as delegates from 47 different species gathered for the first Galactic Council meeting in recorded history. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built using the combined knowledge and resources of species that had been enemies or strangers just months before. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Chen could see vessels from dozens of worlds docked at the station's multiple ports. Sleek Altarian science ships floated alongside the crystalline vessels of the Zenth Collective, while the organic-looking craft of the Verdani shared docking space with the angular warships of the liberated Kethvar Republic. It was a sight that would have been impossible under Zephyrian rule. Captain Chen, a familiar voice called from behind her. She turned to see Ambassador Talak of the Altarian Commonwealth approaching, his blue-scaled features showing what she had learned to recognize as genuine warmth among his species. Ambassador, she replied, offering the formal greeting gesture that had become standard among the new alliance. I trust the preliminary negotiations are progressing well. Talak's expression conveyed cautious optimism. Better than we had dared hope, actually. The working committees have reached consensus on most of the fundamental principles: species sovereignty, voluntary cooperation, mutual defense against aggression, and shared technological advancement. These principles would have been revolutionary under the old galactic order, where the Zephyrian Empire had dictated terms to every other species. Now, formerly subjugated civilizations were working together as equals to create something unprecedented, a galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination. Chen moved to a tactical display showing the current political map of the galaxy. Nearly 60% of former Zephyrian territory was now controlled by independent governments, most of which had declared their intention to join the new Galactic Council. The remaining Zephyrian holdings had consolidated around their core worlds, forming a much smaller but more defensible territory. What about the Zephyrians themselves? She asked. Any word from their new government? Talak activated a diplomatic summary. Chancellor Vexman has indicated that the Zephyrian Republic is interested in joining the Council, but they're requesting security guarantees. Many of their former tributary species are demanding reparations for centuries of oppression. This was one of the most delicate issues facing the new galactic order. The fall of the Zephyrian Empire had liberated billions of beings, but it had also created a power vacuum that needed to be filled carefully. Some species wanted revenge against their former oppressors, while others simply wanted to ensure that no similar empire could rise again. Chen understood the complexity of the situation. The humans had deliberately avoided conquering Zephyrian territory, instead supporting local independence movements and helping establish democratic governments. But with great power came great responsibility, and humanity now found itself in the position of mediating between species that have been enemies for millennia. The humans have made it clear that we support reconciliation over retribution, Chen said. The Zephyrian people weren't responsible for their leaders' policies, and they deserve the same right to self-determination as any other species. Tilak nodded approvingly. This had been one of many examples of human wisdom that had impressed the other species. Instead of using their technological superiority to replace the Zephyrian Empire with their own domain, humanity had consistently advocated for democratic principles and species equality. Captain Tilak said, "May I ask you something that has puzzled many of our delegations? Your species possesses technology that far exceeds anything else in the galaxy, yet you seem content to remain equal partners in this new alliance. Why haven't you claimed the dominant position that your capabilities could secure?" Chen had been asked this question many times over the past year by species that couldn't understand human motivations. The concept of voluntarily sharing power was alien to civilizations that had been shaped by centuries of Zephyrian rule. "Because that's not who we are," she replied simply. "Humans believe that diversity makes us stronger, that cooperation achieves more than domination. We didn't fight the Zephyrians to replace their empire with our own. We fought them to create a galaxy where every species could determine its own destiny." Before Tala could respond, an announcement echoed through the station's corridors. "All delegates to the main assembly hall. The Galactic Council is now in session." Chen and Tralak made their way to the enormous chamber that had been constructed at the heart of New Horizons. The hall could accommodate representatives from over 100 different species, with environmental controls adjusted for a wide range of atmospheric and gravitational requirements. As they entered, Chen could see delegates from across the galaxy taking their positions. The Verdani had brought living wood furniture that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while the silicon-based Chronari sat on crystalline formations that resonated with harmonic frequencies. Each species was represented according to their own cultural traditions, yet all were equal participants in the proceedings. At the center of the hall stood Admiral Catherine Harrison, now serving as the interim president of the Galactic Council. She had been elected to the position by unanimous vote of all member species, a recognition of both human leadership in the liberation and their commitment to democratic principles. "Delegates of the Galactic Council," Harrison began, her voice carried throughout the hall by translation systems that converted her words into every represented language. "We gather today to formally establish a new era in galactic civilization. For the first time in recorded history, the major powers of our galaxy meet as equals, not as conquerors and conquered." The significance of her words wasn't lost on anyone present. Many of the delegates represented species that had been subjugated for so long they had forgotten what independence felt like. Others came from civilizations that had survived through isolation, never daring to challenge Zephyrian authority directly. Harrison continued, "The Terran delegation would like to present our proposal for the foundational charter of this new alliance." A holographic display appeared above the assembly showing the text of the proposed charter. Chen had helped draft the document, working with legal experts and philosophers from dozens of different species to create something that would protect the rights of all member civilizations. The charter was based on principles that humans had developed through their own difficult history: the right of species to govern themselves, the importance of voluntary cooperation over forced compliance, and the commitment to mutual defense against any power that threatened the freedom of council members. Article 1, Harrison read, "All species possess inherent rights to self-determination and sovereignty over their traditional territories. No member of this council may impose its will upon another through force or coercion." The Zephyrian delegate, Chancellor Vexman, raised a question. "Admiral Harrison, how would this charter address territorial disputes between member species?" "Article 7 establishes the council's mediation authority," Harrison replied. "Disputes would be resolved through negotiation and arbitration, not military action. Any member that resorts to conquest or aggression would face collective response from the entire council." This was the key innovation that differentiated the new system from the old Zephyrian model. Instead of rule by the strongest, the council would provide security through collective action. No single species would be powerful enough to dominate the others, but all would be strong enough together to resist any external threat. Over the following hours, delegates debated the specific language and implementation of the charter. The discussions were spirited but respectful, with species that had been enemies working together to find common ground. Chen watched with satisfaction as former Zephyrian tributary races worked alongside their former overlords to create systems that would prevent future oppression. The most contentious issue was the question of military forces. Many species wanted to maintain their own defense fleets, while others advocated for a unified council navy. The compromise that emerged reflected human influence. Each member would retain sovereignty over their own military, but would contribute to a joint peacekeeping force under council authority. The Joint Defense Force will be commanded by officers drawn from all member species, Harrison explained, rotating leadership to ensure that no single civilization dominates military decisions. Its mission will be to protect council members from external threats and to intervene in cases of aggression between member species. The HFY delegate asked, "What about technological sharing? Will the more advanced species be required to provide their innovations to the less developed ones?" This was another area where human values had shaped the proposal. Instead of hoarding technological advantages, the charter established research councils, where all species could contribute their knowledge and share in the benefits of combined scientific advancement. Article 12 establishes the Collaborative Research Initiative, Harrison said. All members will contribute to joint scientific projects according to their capabilities, and all will benefit from the resulting discoveries. The goal is to raise the technological baseline of all council species while respecting each civilization's right to maintain certain proprietary systems. Chen smiled as she watched delegates from primitive worlds realize that they would have access to technologies that had been restricted to advanced civilizations for millennia. At the same time, species like the humans would gain insights from biological, crystalline, and energy-based life forms that approached problems from completely different perspectives. As the day progressed, consensus emerged around the fundamental principles of the new galactic order. The charter was approved by unanimous vote, with each species signing according to their own cultural traditions. Some used electromagnetic signatures, others provided genetic samples, and the energy beings contributed harmonic resonance patterns. When the ceremony concluded, Chen found herself standing with Harrison and several other human officers, reflecting on what they had accomplished. "Admiral," she said, "do you think it will last? Can this many different species really work together peacefully?" Harrison looked around the assembly hall, where delegates from dozens of worlds were socializing and beginning to form the personal relationships that would underpin interspecies cooperation. "Bera," she replied. "A year ago, most of these species had never spoken to each other, except through Zephyrian intermediaries. Today they're debating legislation and planning joint missions. If they can come this far, this quickly, I have to believe they can continue building something better." As if to prove her point, Chen noticed the Verdani delegates sharing bioluminescent art forms with the crystalline Zenth representative, while former Zephyrian officers discussed defensive strategies with Altarian tactical experts. The barriers between species were breaking down as beings discovered they had more in common than they had ever imagined. Besides, Harrison continued with a slight smile, they have one significant advantage that no previous galactic government has enjoyed. "What's that?" Chen asked. "Humans," Harrison said simply, "not because we're superior, but because we're different. We're the species that proved change was possible, that the old order could be challenged and replaced with something better. As long as that example exists, as long as there are humans willing to stand up for the principles we've established here, this council will remember what it was created to achieve." Over the months that followed, the new Galactic Council proved more successful than even its most optimistic supporters had dared hope. Trade flourished between species that had never been allowed to interact directly under Zephyrian rule. Scientific advances accelerated as different forms of intelligence collaborated on problems that had puzzled individual species for centuries. Most importantly, conflicts that would have once led to devastating wars were resolved through negotiation and compromise. The humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had used superior military power not to conquer, but to liberate. They had employed advanced technology not to dominate, but to elevate. They had demonstrated that the strongest species in the galaxy could also be the most principled. As Captain Chen returned to active duty with the Joint Defense Force, she carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that humanity had lived up to its highest ideals. They had encountered a galaxy ruled by fear and oppression, and they had transformed it into something based on hope and cooperation. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over, replaced by an era of unprecedented collaboration between species that had learned they were stronger together than any of them could be alone. And at the heart of this new galaxy was the species that had made it all possible. Humans who refused to accept that might made right, and who proved that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them become your friends. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's military might, but it had learned to respect humanity's moral courage. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was what would shape the future of civilizations among the stars.